Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. So, what night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. As always, we're going to go around our fantastic panel and begin to do our introductions. And I'm going to start with the urologist of the stars who hates accolades, but he is here with us on this evening. That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason.
Well, the urologist looks up and worships the stars, but he ain't one of them. And I thank you for that, Nikki. My name is Dr. Terry Mason, retired urologist and public health official, both for the county and the city. And we're happy to be here and grateful that the congressman has provided this platform. So hopefully we'll share information that'll be helpful to you tonight.
Thank you,
Thank you so very much, Dr. Mason. Dr. Graham, go right ahead, Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Nikki. Like Dr. Mason, I'm a retired physician. I worked in the Western suburbs for 30 years. And after retirement, I spent...
Hold on a second. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. And after I spent 2 years working in the representative's office on healthcare issues. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here to work with my colleagues. And I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Outstanding, outstanding. Jack with us. He says, hey to you guys. Hey, everyone who's here. I want to say hey to Yolanda Williams, who's here with us just as well. She's saying good evening to everyone and thanking everyone for being here with us. Gentleman who has the best art, and I really believe he is a connoisseur. That's our very own Joseph Harrington. Joe?
Hey, Joe, you're muted.
Joe, you're muted.
I'm unmuted now. It's great to be here with my esteemed colleagues, people I've known for years and people I've met somewhat relatively recently, but I do respect everyone that's on this call. I applaud Congressman Davis and you for providing this platform. I look forward to an interesting evening. By way of background, I've worked in a number of fields, but mostly public health and healthcare. Worked at 3 different hospitals, retired from the Illinois Department of Public Health in 2017 as a regional health officer for Cook County, and proceeded to retire, but I'm still very active. I was recently elected president of the Roseland Community District Commission, and I'm serving on the Cook County Health Board.
Lord have mercy. You are a commissioner.
Promiscuous. I don't think that's an appropriate term. I might be doing a lot of things, but I'm definitely not promiscuous. but thank you for that. Maybe in my youth, but not at this point. Don't be grinning,
Want
Pete.
to say hey to Deacon. Want to say hey to Deacon Gray, who's here with us. He says, okay. Want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who is here. She says, good evening to everyone. To the doctor who's known on the streets as being Dr. 100, that's our very own Dr. Maya Green. Dr. Green.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nikki, for making this platform. Thank you, Congressman Davis, for having me and creating a space where community can come right up and join in conversation where we can learn from each other, learn how to protect our tribe, and support each other through this COVID in the past, COVID in the future, and whatever comes. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. We see that Dr. Ansel Johnson is here. He says, great panel. I always learn something. So thank you, Dr. Ansel, and you have to come back and join us just as well. To Dr. Pete, who is the father and that extraordinary chef who's here with us on this evening, who was our lead on last week and made sure that we got through our panel discussion as everyone was in town hall meeting. So thank you so much, Dr. Pete.
Hey, Nikki, thanks so much. I appreciate you and the congressman for creating this forum. I always appreciate my colleagues. I learn so much from them and have learned so much from them. I'm looking forward to communicating with our community to have us to make better decisions in the absence or presence of primary care providers. We're not here to replace your primary care provider. We are definitely here to empower you, the community, to make good decisions along with your provider. So we're about patient empowerment and power to the patients.
All right. Power to the patients. To our chair of Westside, our health chair of the Westside Branch NAACP Health Committee, our very own Tyrena Newkirk,
Yes, nice to see everyone. Thank you for having me as a guest. I am very blessed to be in the company of such esteemed colleagues here and excited to discuss the topic for tonight. Thank you for having me, Congressman Davis.
Outstanding, and thank you. Outstanding. I want to say hey to Sister Bonnie who's here with us, to Nellie King who says good evening to everyone. Thank you so very much. And once again, it's power to the patient. Well, to the man who makes this possible for us each and every Monday night, to the one who teaches us that true health is wealth. And I know you're asking questions, what happened to Dr. Hampton? He must be having some technical difficulties, but I believe he'll probably be right back. Want to make sure we bring on our very own congressman, that's Congressman Danny K. Davis of the Illinois 7th Congressional District.
Well, thank you all very much. I look forward to a tremendous discussion this afternoon. We had a great discussion earlier today at the Oak Park City Hall. We had with us the whip of the Democratic Caucus of the House of Representatives. We were discussing climate change and what's going on with it. The NAACP, as a matter of fact, was well represented at the meeting and raised some very serious questions. So now we're talking health, and nothing is more important than health. I have a number of friends who are ill right now. Hospitals where they are. I have a brother who is ill, but he's doing all right. He's too tough, too much to happen to him. But he's younger than I am. So health is wealth, and why don't we get it on? We are ready to roll, Nikki. Our equipment will, thanks to the federal government, we're getting all this money to do broadband and improve our infrastructure for communication. But sometimes it just ain't working right. Even with,
I know. I want to say hey to all. Yeah. I think I'm delayed. Hey, want to say hey to Audrey Jaycox, who is here with us. She says, good evening, everyone. And I see that Dr. Hampton got his internet back working, but now he looks frozen. So can you hear me, Tony? So while he's working on that, Linda Johnson is agreeing with you, Congressman. She says, laughing out loud. Healthy wealth, so true, is from Deacon Gary. Sometimes we just never know when something's going to go out, and that's okay. Well, Dr. Mason, I know there's been some there's Tony. Tony, how about now? You're unfrozen. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, it looks like my phone internet was competing with my home internet, so I technology. But anyway, I'm a family doc, obesity doc at Advocate Health, and always trying to connect the patients with the barriers that prevent them from being successful. So I'm all about helping people achieve metabolic health. But more importantly, when they have barriers, instead of me pointing the finger at them, I try to help them unravel the reason why. And then with that unraveling, they find success. So anybody who's checking us out today,
Now, Dr. Hampton is talking about
Okay.
his internet, but that's a good old fashioned Android phone for you.
That's not right, Pete. Dr. Thomas, that's not right.
I still feel like we're in college.
All
like,
right, what I'm going to do
a
is
straight face with this guy.
Yeah,
So Dr.
he's
Hampton,
unfrozen.
I
He's frustrated though.
I can't keep a straight face with you. I mean, I told him that that's your good old fashioned Android phone.
Hey, this is an Apple. Don't do that. And shout out to all the Android people. That was my past, but I'm good now. So you're funny.
You're not back. You better.
I'm Android and I'm doing okay.
Okay,
that's right. Exactly.
All right. I come in peace.
That's right.
Speaking of that, I really want to. I know, Dr. Mason, you're an advocate of Black or African Americans really focusing on self-love in many different forms. I know you recently brought to light some studies that were kind of looking at how African Americans historically have been taught to disregard self and love others, and like the doll experiment and things like that. When it comes to that, I just, this week I didn't know anyone's thoughts. I saw an example of self-love, self-accountability, and self-growth. And shout out to Sha'Carri Richardson, because the mental journey and the emotional journey and the self-development that one has to go through all those stages and come back like Dr. Hampton is on the internet, not back but better, I think is a great example of what it means to trust yourself, love yourself, center yourself, focus, and go after, your purpose. And so I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that as we kind of organize for the next, segment or anything like that. But shout out self-love. I think this is a great place to bring it when we see examples, because there's so many examples that may encourage us to think otherwise of ourselves and doubt ourselves. But that's an example that I found inspirational.
Well, thank you, Dr. Maya. I agree with you. I think that any of those examples are always good for us to lift up and amplify. We still have, for many different reasons, with all of what's going on in our community, I don't think we can look at that with justice without looking at what has happened to the family over the last 50, 60 years. You cannot have that conversation without that. And when we look at that, we also have to look at what have been the influencers that have helped to create the environment that we see today. Mm-hmm. And those things are not necessarily of our own doing. I'm not trying to place blame someplace else, but there's a lot of things. When a family is destroyed, when the nuclear family is not what it used to be or can be what it used to be, that when there is a blatant disregard for law and order that comes from your initial upbringing as a child, because that's the first place you learn, at least I did in our house, law and order was the rule of the day. And the law and the order came from the parents. And that was about it. And anybody else on that block, for that matter, who was an adult. So I think that we've gotten away from some very basic things that help save us. And I think what we see now are the result of the rupture of that fabric.
Yeah, when I think about like why people struggle, I ask this question every day. And I think that in order for us to answer those questions, we have to do more research. And, it could be something as simple as making sure all health systems are collecting data around, who's in front of them. So is that person LGBTQ? Is that person a person who doesn't have access to food? Is that person having issues with their education? So once we collect the data, and then because now the problem is, how do you collect the data, right? Some of it is what the health system does, but some of it is when we do research, we have to make sure that we include communities of color, and we have to make sure that that research is done in a way that honors the community of color, because people don't trust. So the last thing they want to do is be involved in research and feel like they're being used as a tool. So you have to be very thoughtful about how you engage that community. Maybe it's through the church, maybe it's through community organizations. And then the research then can reflect what's best for that population as well as others. And I think that as we interact with each other, and we have people from outside the community interacting with us, we have to make sure that they understand that culture. We need to they understand why we struggle. And a lot of that is being collaborative. So what I would like to see is organizations like our health system that I'm in is actually literally at the table with the patients, the community, the pastors, the community organizations, and even the bigger organizations like Amazon, Google, who have more resources. And we work collaboratively to create a path to remove barriers that prevent people from being successful. And I'm, of course, talking about social determinants of health. And then beyond that, I think we have to think about public health policy. That's when our congressman comes into play, and we create policies that support that. And we do it in a way, again, that honors the community. We're being empathetic. We empower the community. And then we have to be patient, because the healthcare infrastructure that's broken has been broken for a long time. The healthcare infrastructure that's been that led to all this distrust has had this distrust for a long time. So we're not going to fix it in a day. But if we have more people on the team who are focused on, health equity, for example, then what will happen is that we'll make gradual improvement. And then I think what I would like to see, I want to see health systems and insurers and Google and all these people making public statements saying that this is important to me. And then we'll use that as leverage to then say, hey, guys, we actually care about these issues. A person of color should be treated the exact same way as a person who's not of color. And let's make sure that we create bridges. But we don't do it by pointing at people and blaming people. What we do is we find common ground, common ways of addressing this issue. And I think that if we do that, we'll get closer to our goal of having a world where it's closer to equal. Maybe we won't get all the way there, but we just want to get to a place where people can go to the health system and feel comfortable that their family members being treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in, and I'm not going to disagree with anything that Dr. Hampton said, but I want to add some context. It's not lost on me, and actually it's been reported all day, that this is the 60th anniversary of Dr. King's March on Washington. And one of the things that I remembered, and I went back and I looked at and reviewed his speech, he talked about the architects of our republic, and that they were signing what he referred to as a promissory note, and then went on to say, we got a bad check, and the check came back marked insufficient funds. But he also said, we refuse to believe the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. So Dr. King was an optimist, and it's also not lost on me that the last book he released, it was released after his death, is called Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos? We've lost community. And we're in chaos now. We need to go back to community. So I would think, and I think that that's one of the things that was talked about, self-love, that we have to get back to self-love and rebuilding a sense of community. We've lost our sense of community moving forward, and that's gotten us into the situation we are now. We're disconnected in ways that sometimes we're not even aware of, and we don't realize. And until we can come together and be in community with each other, and not only respect ourselves as individuals, but demonstrate some degree of self-love, things are going to get much, much worse moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to agree with my colleagues and just say, Dr. Hampton, when we were in school, I remember when we were freshmen, the sophomores would come to us and almost like as if I can't believe they were like a year ahead of us because they seemed like they was somebody's mama and daddy because they was telling us, here's who you need to take for organic. Here's the notes. Here's the old exams. I mean, it was a sense of community like you would not believe. Now, you wouldn't be surprised at this because it's at an HBCU. But then when you talk to the kids now who are at that very same institution, shout out Xavier University, the best HBCU there is. I see over there Dr. Meyer from Alabama. Okay, but now the kids talk about that they're not as connected to that next class coming in, and that it's harder and harder to connect with that next class. That's insane to me because that's the reason why you're there. I mean, listen, God bless you. You go to another institution, but you're there. You're at that HBCU to get the kind of support. How would you disconnect? How does that happen? So, but I think to your point, Joe, that it happened so slowly, like that. It was almost like, it wasn't something sudden. It was something that was incremental. They talked about, when you throw a frog in like boiling water, the frog knows to hop right out. But if you put the frog in regular water and then just slowly crank the heat up, that the frog will eventually burn to death. And so I think that's what's happening in terms of that sense of community. I think we have not seen the health outcomes as a result of that disconnection. We have not seen the drop in Black doctors and Black attorneys that will happen as a result of that incremental cranking up of that temperature. That includes, and I mean that's metaphorically speaking, but from a real sense, we're talking about that disconnection. So I totally agree. I think we need to reconnect, celebrate each other, and have that sense of accountability. Like we had a sense of accountability for that class ahead of us because they were giving us their notes, because they were checking in on us. And so I just really want us to go back to that. So that's what I have to share.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, as a non-medical professional, but somebody who is often working in close contact with community members who are seeking health resources, right? One example that I think of when I think about missing community is when we look at our maternal and child health numbers. And some of the interventions that have been proven successful at addressing the low mortality, the high mortality rate of Black women and Black babies. It is Black Breastfeeding Week, so just wanted to throw that out there. And when thinking about Black breastfeeding, I think about the community and how important being a part of a community is when it comes to addressing that issue.
So I think, I am on. I'm sorry, were you, Tyrina, were you finished? I know
my kid wanted me to be finished, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, two things I had a question about with that. Before I go with my question, I just want to underscore what you said. Benefits of best breastfeeding, good nutrition, different types of milk made by mothers are made for their children or their offspring. For instance, cow's milk is made for a baby cow. Human milk is made for baby humans. That's an example. And so, and to underscore, the best milk for a baby cow isn't human milk, and the best milk for a baby human is not cow's milk. Protection, antibodies, which babies aren't born with a protective. Remember during COVID, we talked about that army that comes out and on site, will attack or will spy out, see what something interrupting the body is about. and then go back and be ready next time. Babies aren't born with that. Just like when we're babies, our features aren't all the way formed. Our immune system isn't all the way formed. So where do we get that protection from? Right? We don't come out as babies being like, "Oh, it's time for me to eat. Let me go to the kitchen and whip me up something." Our parents do that for us, and that's an example of feeding. But what about our immune system? Well, our parents do that for us. The milk that we get from our parents comes from our mother, and then that's where we get our immune system from as babies until our immune system starts to mature, right? The first breast milk that comes out is full of nutrients, full of brain power, things like that. And then, just like cow's milk, you leave it out, it spoils. It's not, it got to be a certain temperature or it denatures, everything like that. Coming straight from the mom, the milk is ready. It goes where mommy and baby go, things like that, right? And then it also creates, especially in these times, a special bond. There's literally chemicals released. Have you ever either been feeding a baby milk or for those of us who have breastfed our babies, when you see that eye contact, that's because of a chemical called oxytocin. It's letting the baby know and the parent know who belongs to who, and building that chemical that promotes protection one for the other. It connects you with your tribe in that manner. And so those are some of the benefits. To underscore what you were saying, did you want to hop back in, Tarina?
Yes.
Or no?
I got rid of her with a snack, but I did want to I wanted to connect that to that community piece, because what we're finding in communities is that Black women and other women of color are not getting the support that they need to participate in breastfeeding, and that has a huge impact on their trajectory postpartum and the baby's first few months of life. And so what we're seeing is that we're building our own communities. We're creating Southside Birthing Center. We're creating midwife groups. Chocolate Milk Mamas are popping up around the city of Chicago. And I just think that that's a great example of how the community has essentially kind of taken on this essentially health issue and has started to really make an impact and move the needle on getting women the resources that they need to survive pregnancy, to survive those months postpartum, and to help improve the quality of life and health outcomes for their babies.
I am absolutely delighted to hear this. When I was Commissioner of Health for the city of Chicago, we actually helped pass ordinances to have every major employer in the city of Chicago provide a room that a woman could go and pump and store their milk for their child, because there should be something that is encouraged, not discouraged. And then we put too many barriers in front of women who choose to breastfeed. And African American women, though at one time breastfed everybody's babies, we're not feeding our own as much as we should. So hats off to you, and hats off to any of the moms that are listening and that have breastfed their children. I would employ them to encourage their daughters when they become mothers. It is the perfect food for your infant. You don't need a formula, whatever that is. You don't need milk that comes, as been rightly pointed out, from another species. Every female of the species makes milk for that species, specifically for that species. And I'm grateful to hear that this is happening. And my hat's off to the work that you're doing.
Yes. And for women who are not able to breastfeed, there are options. We do understand that some women's bodies do not respond well to the moments postpartum, and it makes it difficult. Maybe the baby is in the NICU. Like in my case, my baby was in the NICU for a month, and it made it very difficult. But there are options in community of Black women, of women of color, to get breast milk. So I just wanted to also bring that to everyone's attention as well.
If someone wants to know where they can find those options, where would they look?
Well, for one, they can attend my event on Wednesday. We're having a virtual conversation on Wednesday at 6,
Okay.
a conversation on Black breastfeeding and Black women. And I'll have a bunch of specifically West Side resources. I'm the part of the West Side NAACP, but a lot of the resources that I'll have at the table are virtual and have South Side locations. So they can follow the NAACP's Facebook page to get that information. It'll also be hosted on our website after Wednesday,
Okay.
cwnaacp.org.
I interrupted. Sorry, I was about to say something. Maybe it went out. Say it again for me, please.
cwbnaacp.org, Chicago West Side Branch NAACP on Facebook.
Awesome.
But this is only confirmation of the need to collaborate. So if I'm in a large health system and this is not my area of expertise, I can provide support for these programs. If I'm a pharmaceutical, even though that's a little maybe against what they're trying to do, I can collaborate. If I'm Google, if I'm Amazon, and I care about health equity, I can collaborate. And the reason why the collaboration is important, because, you know, Tyrena is somebody the community may trust already. They may not trust the guy in the big suit with the suitcase. You know, even if he has money in his hands, they may not trust him because they think, well, he's still trying to make money off of it. He has an alternative agenda. So I think, so this doesn't sound very complicated. When I've looked at data dealing with this subject, it is clear we have health inequities in this country. It's not like we have to do more research to figure that out. The question is, do we have the political will to do something about it? Are we going to put our money and hearts where they should be, right? Are we going to change the infrastructure of our health systems where I live and create a path where if I have a person in front of me who's having issues around breastfeeding or any other initiative, am I going to then know that the program that you're going to have on Wednesday, that it even exists? Do I have a way to connect so I can just push a button, bam, guess what? I got a great program for you. I don't know much about it, but just make sure you're there on Wednesday and they'll help hold your hand and guide you. And I think that's what it's really about. Like, let's take what we've learned they've been doing, I don't remember the year, but it was like in the 1980s. And that's when we started talking about health inequities. And when we started talking about it, we started doing research and we started understanding what it means. And we learned a lot of stuff. We learned that if I have not just Tyrena, but if I have a doctor who looks like the community, maybe they'll be more engaged. So we need to train more doctors and pharmacists and nurses and nutrition professionals that looks like the community that these people are living in. And then with that little nugget, maybe there will be a little bit more faith in that clinician or provider. We need to have policies that help us implement these ideas. We have to make sure that people have access to these ideas. We can't just live in this bubble where we talk about it in this platform, but that mom who, may have to work a couple of jobs, she may not ever hear this conversation. So how do we ensure that she gets access to this information, the end user? So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think what we need to do is have the political will to do it. And once we do that, I think we'll move that needle.
Yeah, I want to jump in and address that issue of political will, particularly with Congressman Davis being here with us. That really, that's our job, and people need to vote. I mean, one of the things that's really discouraging is the lack of people that actually vote across the board. But we're among the worst in terms of voting. And so the political will doesn't come from the people, because the people elect the people that can do things, that can make change in terms of the government. So if we're talking about political will, we're really implying that people need to be a part of the process, and we need more of us, more people that look like us, to get out and vote. That will shift the political will. But if we're not voting, there's no reason for people to vote along the lines that we expect them to, because they figure that they're going to keep their jobs, because ultimately it's a job, and they won't worry about whether or not there's a political will. They will continue to do what many of them have done. Not Congressman Davis, but there are many elected officials that don't do much of anything. They talk about what they've done since they've been elected, but it may not amount to very much. So political will might require pressure from the constituents of those individuals.
Absolutely. Informed voting is necessary. A simple Google will let you know the type of legislators in office that support some of these equity initiatives, including Congressman Davis. When you look at state reps like Camille Lilly or Senator Lightfoot, they have a proven track record of introducing legislation, supporting legislation that does create opportunities to put more people of color in the healthcare professions, to help get funded social work, to help social workers get covered under insurance, and to make sure that doulas and midwives, who are often community members, are being able to be properly compensated so that they can make a livable wage doing work that significantly impacts the community. So I just think, like, to your point, informed voting and understanding how to vote for legislators who have proven history of getting funding and legislation passed for these type of resources, I think, is the most important piece.
Karina, I was just, you know how they say I'm 100? I was going to keep it 100. And informed voting, yes. And for people that got what we call receipts, right? Mr. Harrington, when you said that, it struck me. And I was talking to a couple of people, and I want to say it here, because I was talking to a couple of people, and they was like, well, who do I vote for? Who do I vote for? If you are taking it upon yourself and you're in a space where you're going to do your duty, you also have a duty to inform yourself. And that simple Google that Irina is talking about is not the night before the election. The simple, so the Googling and finding out the facts occurs now until the time you cast your ballot. And it's almost like, Pete, who I was gonna let you slide on that Xavier, Alabama A&M, but I see you feel guilty for not going to Alabama A&M, so you brought it up yourself. It came out. What's saying you come out? You see what I'm saying? I was gonna let you slide, but the bottom line is,
we got love for each other.
Power to the patients,
right.
And also we always talk about what power is to the people, but then it's always interesting what we do with the powers we have, right? So we have the power to vote. Take it seriously. Do your due diligence. Somebody put JSU and threw me off my game, but I'm just going to keep on going. In the comments, Nellie Parnell King, I'm going to deal with that later. I got to stay focused. And do your due diligence. Find out receipts, because I can show up and tell you I've done all these things on a commercial, because what I'm counting on is that you didn't do your due diligence and you're just going to vote off emotion. And we have to vote for our communities. And when people don't make decisions for our communities, when they have no receipts and they want to vote on credit, it's time to cash out. Okay. And so we have to do your due diligence, community. We are in, especially, I'm speaking transparently to the African American community right now, because we're in a space where, if you look around, we cannot afford not to be unified. We cannot afford not to align ourselves among an agenda that supports us. We have to stand up for ourselves, because nobody is coming to save us. We have to do our due diligence and keep or vote in people that are doing stuff for our community, and be mindful when they're not. So that I'm going to step back about that, but that due diligence is for people that got receipts.
So I just want to say,
and mine's going to be real brief, because you're talking about two categories of people that are not informed voters, and I'm also talking about people that never vote. I mean, we got two problems. We got people that never vote, and we got people that really don't make an informed decision about who they vote for. And that may be even worse than not voting, because we get the same thing over and over again.
So I was just going to comment on, there's a problem when you don't vote, because that means when you don't vote, your voice isn't heard. And the guys on the other side believe only their constituents matter, and they stop listening. So you really have to have the weighted numbers to move the needle. You can't afford not to vote. You don't want to make the other side stronger and give them a bigger voice.
Yeah, and I'll just comment that when I talk to patients about being healthy, I know I see Marvin Glenn has a question about shingles. I'll answer that real quick. But it's not just like you can't improve the health of a person in front of you unless you understand again why they struggle. But more importantly, we have to invest in the communities, right? So if I invest in the communities, I will create, it's almost like you're trying to grow a flower. If I'm growing a flower and it's surrounded by weeds, it's going to be very difficult to really give that flower what it needs. So part of our journey, which makes this very hard, is, I can't house everybody. I can't, employ everybody. I can't, make sure we get all the stores to have fresh foods instead of potato chips and Snickers bars, right? So it's very complex, but we have to have a world where we think about how do we reinvest in communities, and some of that reinvestment is free. It's us, some of the people on this panel, getting in front of people and doing health fairs, and some of this stuff is not expensive to do, but you have to do that. And I think if we do that, what people who are not in communities of color need to understand is that when you invest in communities of color, the types of programs that we're doing are also the types of program that help everybody. So don't get it twisted. A poor person in rural Illinois is also struggling. This is really not just about Black or Hispanic. There's a whole lot of folks struggling. And if we create programs that identify that you're having issues with access to good food, you have issues with transportation, you have issues with education, that'll help everybody. That's not just a Black or Hispanic issue. That's a Native American. That's a America issue. So if we help that group, we'll be helping everybody. And we have to start thinking broad about this. We need to create policies that really speak to the needs of everybody, because last time I checked, everybody was struggling. Now, real quick for Marvin Glenn, is shingles vaccine recommended? As a clinician, you tend to encourage vaccines because again, going back to COVID, 98% of the people who were dying during the pandemic were unvaccinated. So I'm a little biased, and I totally accept patients who are not interested. Shingles, this little rash that can get into the come up, sometimes it's just a little itchy rash. It's not a big deal, and you're good. But I have a certain percentage of my patients who, when they get this rash, they get really sick. They get tired. They get pain around the rash. For some people, it's a couple of weeks. For other people, it's a couple of years. Now, imagine getting a rash that's so painful that you have to take strong medicines, and it lasts for months to years. So for me, if I get a vaccine, a couple of shots is necessary for this vaccine, and that'll prevent that. To me, that's a no-brainer. So I think for anybody, particularly over the age of 50, you have to make sure insurance covers it. Sometimes they make you wait to 60. As your immune system gets more vulnerable, maybe you were exposed to chickenpox at a young age, it becomes dormant, it stays in your system, it comes up through the nerve, and that's what makes it painful. If you get what they call herpetic neuralgia, it's a disaster. So I do encourage people to do it because it can happen to anybody. And I just don't think it's worthy of suffering when you can just get a simple vaccine.
Well, outstanding, Dr. Hampton. And, we were laughing at you about your technical difficulties you've having, and my AT&T just went mad crazy over here. So I don't know where we were. I know Linda Johnson said charity begins at home, and if it's not coming, it's going into our neighborhoods or our community. When the home is broken, we will see what we see in the streets. Linda Johnson also commented and says, so true, Dr. Hampton. So you must have dropped some additional nuggets, and she saw those. You've already answered Marvin Glenn's question. I see that Nellie Purnell King says JSU. So I know I missed something because y'all out here doing shout outs again. So I know I must have missed something pretty good. Connie Taylor says, good evening to everyone. Dorothy Murphy also says, good evening to everyone. And then, of course, Marvin Glenn says, thank you, and I appreciate it. We have an inbox message that we got when they say, I would like to stay anonymous, but I want to share with Dr. Hampton, you are right. We do have an American problem. However, in some of our American problems, African Americans never get the opportunity to reap any of the benefits. So I must say, I am Black, And when will the Black people be first at the table?
You know, there's a saying: if we are not, what do they say? If we're not explicit about it, you know, then we get kind of covered up. We bear the brunt. And so, while I do agree, we have a problem, and our country loses out because a lot of our innovation, a lot of our ideas, a lot of our solutions come from the African American community, right? So if we're not at a lot of the tables, we do miss out. However, we have to, sometimes be very explicit about African American community and what that looks like for us. I'll say that.
Let me say
Yeah,
something
Well,
real
Carl
quick.
yeah.
You
Ellis
said
is,
Tony, can
Carl,
I jump in? I
Carl
just
yeah,
want
Ellis
go
to
is
ahead. Do
touch
your
and
actually
rip
thing.
off
saying,
what Maya was saying.
one
Because
sec-
I thought what she's going to say, if you're not at the table, you may be on the menu. We've been on the menu for quite a while.
and if you're on the menu, Joe,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you're going to be selected off that menu either. So let's be clear
Let's
about that menu. Tia
look at
Banks
those terms.
says,
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
to be able to
Yeah, but
pop
that means
milk
you may be what people
at
are having for
work in
dinner.
a private room.
But
So Tia Banks says,
Yeah.
I was
go ahead.
blessed to be able to pump milk in a private room, and she thanks Dr. Mason for making sure that that happened for
All
her
right.
over at Cook County Hospital. So Tia says, thank you, Dr. Mason, for that. Carl Ellis actually says, thank you, Dr. Green, for sharing that statement that you just made. It is important. Everyone else comes to the table and they're not afraid to say who they are. Everyone else has an agenda except for us having the Black agenda. And when we mention the Black agenda, we are frowned upon. Well, don't let that
Now,
stop the fight.
while I don't agree, and so while I agree, while I would say, Dr. Hampton, I know that's not what you meant when you said that. I do definitely agree. The other statement that I forgot the person. I want to say their name is Phil Wilson. They said, speaking of the Black community, if we are not explicitly included, we're implicitly excluded. And so we gotta always don't be afraid, be loud about it. I mean, be organized about it, be strategic about it. And most importantly, going back to what we said before, we got to be unified about it.
Yeah.
And be honest about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was in when I was in San Diego last year, I speak at the Symposium for Metabolic Health the last 4 years annually. And I put a slide up, it was a slide that I was talking about a young man in Chicago who does real estate, who I was highlighting. And I just asked the crowd to pause and say, when you see a Black male, what comes to mind, right? And what came, and then I put one of those slides up with all the different words, and it was things like, basketball player, thug. I mean, it was very disappointing to see what the average American. And then when I did more research for that presentation, it says 70% of Americans have anti-Black bias, and some of that bias, you use the word explicit. So you have explicit bias where you are outwardly saying stupid stuff, like some people that have done that in politics over the last few years, and we won't go there. And then you have implicit bias. And implicit bias is when you just don't even know you have it. You don't realize that you're doing things that are biased. So if we're going to change that, what was suggested is we need to be at the table, right? But if we're at the table, you need to actually be given permission by the people who put you at the table to be who you are. You can't just be at the table and say, I done made it now, so I'm good. No, you have to be at the table actually stating things that people at the table may not know, may not understand, and add that flavor that the boardroom normally doesn't hear. And then you can then maybe move some of the people at the table who never understood that perspective, how to look at the world differently and help people in communities of color. So I think it's nuanced, and I'm happy that some organizations are doing their best efforts in spite of the affirmative action issue that just occurred. They're still doing their due diligence to make sure there's diversity, but we must give people permission to be who they are. And if you get into that role and you don't stand as you are, then you're actually doing a complete disservice, because you're then giving the people at the board table the perception that, oh, we good now. We're just getting started. Just putting me at the table is the beginning, and then we have to walk towards figuring out how to improve things.
Frederick Douglass
I
said,
hear what. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just to say, Frederick Douglass said, "Power conceiveth nothing without a demand."
Man, that's right.
And so we are not. I'm not. No offense. I'm not asking. I'm over trying to be your buddy. I'm over seeking your approval. I'm over it. I'm going to make room for the next Dr. Hampton, Dr. Mason. I'm going to make room for the next one. So while I'm there, I'm getting the next one in. Why? Because the diverse voices is what allows us to be powerful. It allows to my colleague's point. Dr. Maya said it. Our country is better the more different voices we have at the table. It's not a matter of just this is better for Asian people or Black people or whoever. This is out as a whole. We are better when we have different voices talking to each other and bringing their unique experiences, because all of us have different experiences. We all come to the table with different experiences. And guess what? Some of those experiences are very common. Some of us got very common goals. Like we all want to see our children do better than us. We all want to see a safer, a healthier community. What? Oh my God, that's such a mind-blowing concept, right? But once you hear this other person that comes from a different environment say the thing that you think to yourself, oh, well, that's similar to what I believe. Well, guess what? We all want healthier communities. We don't want to see the ERs overrun, and we don't want to see cancer rates go up. No one wants to see that, especially if you got into this business. You want to see people do better, and you don't want to see people struggling. And so we want to have an empathetic heart, and part of having us at the table is having us be able to communicate that, to say, while things are hunky-dory to you and to your community, there's a whole community that is not so hunky-dory for. If you think about some of those maternal child rates of African-American women, let any other culture have the rates that we have for women and children dying. Let any other culture have that. We would have fixed this problem. We would have fixed it. And so it's not easy. It's not a happy discussion, but we need to, again, power conceiveth nothing without a demand.
Dr. Mason?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there was a time, I don't know what happened to us. I don't know if it was integration that derailed us. I don't know that was a good move at all. I don't know how history will go back and look at whether or not integration was a big mistake as a position. But one of the things I do know is that as a young child growing up in Inglewood, I saw Black people who came up from the South, not with very much education per se, but they started grocery stores. They opened up liquor stores. They opened up record shops. They opened up the things that were needed in our community to provide jobs to folks, and in addition to the things that we needed in our community. Why the hell do we need to beg somebody to come in our community and sell us something to us? That's crazy as hell to me. And I think that I don't want to deal with this sort of whiny kind of conversation. This is whiny. And I think it's a shame that we're having whiny, weak conversations at this stage in our life. What happened to I was watching the whole thing that brother that did the Beatrice Foods thing, how he created this whole multi-billion-dollar situation. Why? Because he took a chance and he got in the room with people that could do what he wanted to do. We got to stop all this whining and get busy doing what we need to do. Ain't no cavalry coming. If we don't do it for ourselves, we shouldn't get it. And I think that we've got the kind of congressmen and the kind of legislators that if they needed fire in their pooch, they could get it. If we decided what we wanted to do and wanted to see that it got done, I don't need to hear no more complaining and whining and about what we ain't got. We got everything we need. Now, let's end with this. and I said this 2 or 3 times on this show. When I drove the bus, when I was in medical school, I drove the bus for a part-time job, CTA bus, driving night cars, and even sometimes on the weekend driving other areas. But what I did see is that Chicago is not as much segregated by race as it is by ethnicity. And when I went to the different communities like Little Duania, I went to the communities little where they had Thai people and all. Everybody had their own stores with their names and their the language of the store in their language. They hired people from their community. They did the things, and so there's nothing stopping us from doing us. The only thing that stops us from doing that is our own self-hate. And we just need to just admit to that and move on, because I don't want to hear no more whiny conversations.
All right, Dr. Mason. Well, Audrey Jaycock says, I agree, Dr. Mason. Curtis Jones says, agrees. And Steve Brown says, I love this panel. But guess what I'm about to say? Something that none of you all ever want to hear. And that is, it is our time. So before we go around the panel, and we actually do our Until Next Mondays. Of course, you guys know we always have great announcements and great information for you. You know, Dr. Mason told me one day that it's more than a job, that we were brought here on a job for free labor. It's about a career. And the congressman preaches every day, not only that health is wealth, but he also talks about education is the key and having a career. I have a good friend here who joined us tonight who's going to share an announcement, Mr. Don Jones, Don has a unique business. Don has he owns a barber college where he is teaching a career, but inside of this barber college where he teaches a career, he also teaches a health component along with it, where he wants to make sure that all of his barbers have a health component, such as understanding how to use certain things like CPR and Narcan and things of that sort. So Don, you got a 30-second announcement to make, because we've had so many things happening and we had some problems, but I'll definitely bring you back on. But share that announcement with us really quick. And in sharing your announcement, I want you to tell us what you want our viewers to think about until next Monday. I know I threw a lot at you, but go ahead.
All right. So listen, to piggyback off of what Dr. Mason was saying, it's time for us to stop these whiny conversations and actually do something. We have a facility where we spent every single dime to enhance the students of the future learning ability and experiences, right? So it's a barber college, but at the end of the day, we're teaching financial literacy. We start off with just the basics of finance. Then that's 8 weeks, and then another 8 weeks, we come up with a business plan for each student because we want them to be entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. And after that, we work with their credit. So that's another 8 weeks. So by the time you finish school, you not only know how to cut hair, you're on your own shop, right? And this may just catapult you into different things in the future. You may not want to be a barber. You may realize that you can pass a state exam and you may want to get into medicine. Health and awareness, we're trying to change the conversation in barbershops. Too much of this victimhood is in barbershops, and we're complaining, we're blaming white people. We got to start with ourselves first. If we start with ourselves, we'll have an army where we can attack bigger problems together. But right now, we got to focus on the smaller problem, which is us. We got to take care of us first. So we're offering $15,000 per student. We do need some funding because we do have a lot of the students that are choosing these part-time jobs over education. So we are asking for anybody to have any insight to WIOA or anything that can help us help the students. We're paying half their tuition. We just want them to be able to make the right choice. And the right choice is education first. So thank you, Nicole.
No, thank you so much, Don. And just know that your cousin, Dartula Young, is clapping her hands. She sent me some thumbs up. So I guess you made her proud with your announcement on this evening. And our crew from the Core Center, who is always working, they're just grouping up watching Couch Conversations. But our crew that is there wants to thank the congressman for this, because one of the health professionals there is also a barber. He's a physician by day and a barber on the weekends, where he actually teaches at his school on Madison, and he's the one who has the mural on the side of his business that talks about life expectancy in Garfield. So he's doing some big thumb ups right now, and we have a lot of our I don't know if I'm throwing out a secret that maybe I shouldn't, but it's okay. Dr. Mason talked about records, but we have a recording specialist here who can mix some songs up for you, and that's our very own Dr. Pete, who is a physician by day and he DJing at night. So we got a lot of different things going on here. So we just want to say thank you to all these listeners. For your next party, hire Dr. Pete to come be your DJ. He can fix your healthcare needs and help you dance. So, Dr. Hampton, you're until next Monday.
Well, I think for me, it's us understanding what the barriers are. We know it's education, race, socioeconomic issues, where we live, where we work. But going back to the statement, like, let's not fuss about it, let's do something about it. For me, it's about research. We do research that as we work to improve the community, we do the research while we're improving. So if we put initiatives in place in the health system or elsewhere, keep the research coming so we can encourage others to do it. We continue to educate people. We work collaboratively with the communities who are already doing this great work, and we implement this. And more importantly, we encourage our political leaders to create policies that empower people. And we do it in an empathetic way as we reach out to people. So that's my final word. And I'm very optimistic about the future.
Outstanding. Roxanne, we got you next week. We saw that you missed everything, but it's okay. You can always watch it as a rerun. And the West Side Branch NAACP says, this is awesome. Thank you, Congressman Davis, Nikki, the doctors, and the panelists for all of this great insight. Miss Newkirk, Sutton, that is, you're until next Monday.
Yes, until next Monday, please join us on Wednesday at 6 p.m. on the Chicago Westside Branch NAACP's Facebook Live to engage in a critical conversation with Black women on the impact, the benefits, and the barriers of breastfeeding in our community and how we can use that to move the needle on maternal child mortality. Until next time, keep up the good fight.
All right, outstanding. Dr. Pete, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, until next Monday, to my colleagues' point, it is about the social conditions that create a huge barrier for us to obtain optimum health. And the question becomes, where do we bring the fight to? And we need the money. So to Dr. to Dr. Hampton's point, we got to have the data to support that the fact that those conditions create the barriers that create an environment for ill health. So we need more people of color running research projects so that people of color can participate in those projects, and hence create the data necessary to get more money. You see, it's a vicious cycle. You need the money to create the interventions, need the research to support creating the interventions. Anyway, I'm in full support of our community, just to Dr. Mason's point, not being on the fence, but taking it to the court, and honestly being bold enough to speak to powerful people and to create those interventions necessary. So, kudos to my brother Jones. Shout out to you. I want to do some work with you with your barbershop. I'm definitely I'm a barbershop healthcare guy, so I love that.
Outstanding, outstanding. Well, Charles says, great show. Shonda Brown is here just as well. Audrey made a great point. She says, are we doing next Monday? Because it's Labor Day. Audrey, thank you so much. What I'm going to ask, it is a holiday, so we do take the holidays off and we run a rerun. What I'm going to ask is email our office, call our office, or send us an inbox message to tell me what rerun would you like to see for next Monday, because it will not be a live show next Monday. It will be a pre-record that from because it is the holiday. So thank you. So I'm going to challenge our guests to send me those messages and let me know what show would you like to receive. KK says, I agree. How do we get people of color to participate? We're going to work on that and have some answers for you on our next time when we are here. And Linda Johnson says, let's share about the Leadership Credit Union. We can have one of the Leaders Network people on to kind of talk about that in our next one. So thank you so very much. Dr. 100, I want to tell you that DLV Printing says that they have a t-shirt for you that says Dr. 100. So come on and give us your until next Monday.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I will be in Chicago this weekend, so definitely I'll be there to get it. Hey, I greatly appreciate it. I think this conversation boils down to what Dr. Mason, is a lot more experienced and a lot of times more eloquent than I am. Basically, he said, don't talk about it, be about it. And it reminds me of a quote from Marcus Garvey, where it's time for this. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. There is nothing that we put our minds to that we can't do. If we keep ourselves from being distracted from what somebody said, this person said this. Don't talk about it, be about it. They don't want to let me pass this law. Don't talk about it, be about it. They're trying to get rid of affirmative action. Let's not talk about it, be about it. There's enough of us in certain positions, right, to create space for other people, right? They won't give me permission. Don't talk about it, be about it. Why are you asking? And so that's the question. Why are you still in the mentality where you think you have to ask? So and it's all in love and all for our community and all to protect our tribe. Think about that until next Monday.
So we will not talk about it. We will be about it. Dr. 100, who is the family practice medicine doctor and infectious disease specialist by day, and baking them butter cookies at night. All right.
HIV specialist.
That's right. Baking butter cookies at night. All right, Dr. Joe Hamilton, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, mine is going to be real brief because people said a lot. And as I was listening to the conversation and thinking, I was reminded of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. So and I know he's controversial. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. That's what I'm asking everybody to do.
All right. All right. Dr. Douglas Graham, you're until next Monday.
Well, I'm going to go back to something we said earlier. You have to vote. If you don't vote, they won't hear you. If you don't vote, they won't listen to you. So you got to vote.
Thank you. Dr. Terry Mason, you're until next Monday.
Nathaniel Wesley wrote a book a long time ago that chronicled Black hospitals. And one time in the United States, we had 400 Black hospitals in the United States. Today, we have 0, not one. And that's a horrible thing. I as a physician, I cringe when I think about that, because when we don't own or control hospitals, we don't own or control residency programs, training programs, all kinds of other things that we complain about that we can't get people into. Other people have come here and they have understood how to work together and they've done it. And I'm not angry at them because they're only doing what they're supposed to do. We have to do it, and we have to stop talking about it and start doing it. And when I'd like to see, before the Lord closes my eyes forever, that we get another hospital, because then right now we're complaining because we don't have spaces for residents. We don't have spaces for this. We don't have room for that. How are we going to get it if we don't make it happen? So I'm putting it right out right now that we need to think about which hospital we're going to work together and get. It's a shame that after these many years, we've lost 400 hospitals and haven't built one.
All right, Dr. Mason. Really quickly, just want to remind everyone there are some new variants of COVID out here. And as the numbers are creeping up and the seasons are changing, just want to remind everyone there is going to be a new COVID vaccine coming out. And want to remind you that it will be available for you. We want to stay healthy and we want you to be healthy. So we just want to put that on your minds. And if you are ever in a space where you don't feel like that you are safe as far as herd immunity or breathing, just pull your mask out your purse or your pocket. Don't forget that those are still available and around, and that they are here for you to have. So remember to keep yourself safe. To thine own self be true. And as always, the Congressman teaches us health is wealth. So, Congressman, take us home.
You know, when I looked up, I saw a photograph of myself and my father. And I kind of smiled when I saw it. He had his hat on. And he would often say, the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. And that just kept pounding in because there are a lot of things that we don't know. And because of what we don't know, sometimes we misunderstand. Sometimes we don't recognize. Sometimes it's very challenging for elected officials, for people say to them, you don't do nothing. Y'all don't do nothing. Y'all don't stand up. And the elected official is remembering a song that Otis Clay wrote, walk a mile in my shoes. Don't do nothing outstanding. Just walk a mile. And sometimes people don't recognize. He said, I spent an hour the other day in the grocery store talking to a gentleman, he and he was trying to convince me that nothing got done for Black people in the country. And his position was, whatever it is that you folks do, ain't none of it for us, he said. I said, well, if you increase the money for maternal and child health so that mothers can learn more about how to care for their babies. He said, that ain't for us. He said, that's for everybody. He said, I said, but what about the us's who qualify and need those services? He said, everybody that need them ought to get them, but that still ain't for us. So the business of us and where us is fit and where us is are, and just doing this business of trying to make us a lot of different things, make us self-sufficient, make us healthier, make us more aware, convince us to vote more. All of these things are a part of the comprehensive picture. I just left a town hall we had with young people this afternoon at the Mage Adams Boys Club. And when the group first started to talk, they really couldn't get started because it was so funny to them that they just kind of couldn't do it. But as the time went on, they made some of the most eloquent comments that I've ever heard. And so sometimes it's a little patience, takes a little more effort, takes a little more understanding. But the big picture becomes if you keep believing and keep doing.
Mm-hmm.
So the next Monday, just and keep doing. Eventually, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said 60 years ago, on this day, we shall overcome. Have a good night. Have a good week. See you next day. Okay.